I pick up the phone. It's Lieutenant Robert Lombardo of the Pennsylvania State Police. He's the head of the crime unit. And he said, we have a child dead. And it was 1 degree. I said, where? You need to come get me. It's icing. And I go from holding my little girl on the couch to holding the hand of a dead child.
It still hits, I don't miss. I just go, go, go like a go-go flow. And I'm almost known, and I told you so. When I throw these flows like it's Rochambeau, and I ain't too close to the Joe Smoke goes. And I'm on my grind, that is all the time. I do not do breaks, that's right, I stay in dry. And look, I'm back with a little bit of that, a little more cash than it came in with. Ready, that cat is out that bad, but I still ask you, the boy got skills. I don't need her, I don't need him, I don't need help with me, I got this. I can sing songs, I can spit raps, and I can do both, even do this, word.
This episode is brought to you by Sweat Tent, the pioneers of the portable wood-burning sauna. Did you know that using the sauna 3 to 4 times per week could reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease by up to 50% and make you 60% less likely to experience Alzheimer's disease? That's why I've been a big fan of the sauna for years. But having to go to a crowded gym to do it isn't ideal. And all the at-home options are bulky and expensive. That's why I only use the Sweat Tent for my sauna needs. It's the most storable and affordable wood-burning sauna on the market. It not only takes minutes to set up, but it can reach 200 degrees Fahrenheit in 30 minutes or less. So whether you're enjoying it yourself in your backyard, with friends, or in need of a reliable sauna on the go, Sweat Tent is your best choice for the most portable, storable, and enjoyable outdoor sauna experience. All On The Stacks listeners will receive $100 off when you use code OTS. Visit sweattent.com today to get $100 off your purchase with code OTS at checkout. Again, that's sweattent.com to get $100 off with code OTS. Sweat Tent, helping you fire up your home wellness routine. This episode is brought to you by Burn, the fitness company behind the Today Show approved Burn Board. If I'm being honest, working out can be a real chore, especially as a new dad in desperate need of sleep and cardio. Burn is founded by NEPA native Jimmy T. Martin, and his Burn Board offers a low-impact core and cardio experience unlike anything I've done before. They have hundreds of on-demand workouts that are great for beginners, seasoned athletes, and out-of-shape podcast hosts who love supporting small businesses. My wife and I use it pretty frequently throughout the week, and it's honestly a great way to burn a ton of calories without burning a ton of cash. Not to mention, it's a great tool for skiers, runners, wrestlers, and hockey players. Jimmy is offering all On The Stacks listeners 15% off when they use the code STACKS15. Visit theburn.com today to get 15% off your purchase with code STACKS15 at checkout. Again, that's theburn, THEBRRN.com to get 15% off your purchase with code STACKS15. It's time to get on board today with Burn. What's up, podcast? It's your host, Bill Corcoran Jr. here in the Blue Door Studio, protected by Ritchie Security Solutions. Jarrett Ferentino, welcome to the On The Stacks podcast.
Thanks, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate the pocket square there. I mean, you're a well put together guy.
Listen, I try. My wife dresses me.
Does she?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, well, she did a great job, but I have to ask. I mean, you know, the red. I mean, you got a mix here, red and blue. I'm not sure if it's a political statement you're pulling here on the show right off the bat. I'm not sure, but you know, I thought I got to ask.
Well, listen, everything sends a message. Your clothes, your cars, everything you do in your life, and I think we're just trying to find a coat that wasn't too loud for you either. So
yeah. What were you saying before the show that your political party? I said one of the first questions I'm going to ask, you're going to reveal what side of the fence you're on, and you said I got to have you say because I don't want to.
Certainly that comes up in every conversation, no matter what you do in life, is politics. I always tell people I'm a Jarrett-crat. I think most people are Jarrett-crats. They're somewhere stuck in the middle between the extreme lefties and the extreme righties of the world. Unfortunately, we're saturated with both extremes, and you don't hear from what I'll call the normal people of the world who are just working and paying their bills. Right. So I'm a member of that party.
I think I would agree that I'm a member of the same party. And if you had your own political party, I'd actually be joining.
Well, listen, free admission.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, how do I sign up?
I'll tell you, it's that dovetails so much into what I do and the political world and government and just running a business. And it's funny, you encounter so many people that are so frustrated with where things have gone politically. It's the silent majority of the world. I seem to encounter more, but I believe they're out there. And equally frustrated. As a prosecutor, I get asked quite a bit about so much of what's going on both sides of the aisle, even how politics has become, prosecution has become politicized and weaponized. And it's unfortunate that we're at this place where political opponents want to put each other in jail. We're arguing whether things are crimes. I'm in the murder and mayhem business. I'm in the rape, burglary, robbery business. That's what prosecutors should be doing. They should be spending their time protecting the majority of people, not bending over backwards to try to lock up either side of the aisle. And that's what I see. It's very frustrating. But at the same time, that's the beauty of this country. If people don't like it, express it with your vote, express it with your opinion, and go online and fight on X or wherever it is you do your thing.
Yeah. So I've known you for some time. I don't know you, right? But I've seen your face, just from TV, all the other podcasts you're on, and just from all prosecution. Like I've seen a lot about you over the years, and this is we've spoken before. This is like our first real in person. And I think a lot of people in your position, you're a public facing person, but a lot of people like you aren't really actually putting themselves out there in the public.
Right. I mean, I don't hold an elected office. I've been a prosecutor in the DA's office for 20 years, and much of what goes on there is very public. But we aren't, with the exception of the district attorney himself, aren't elected officials. So we have the beauty of getting to do a job we love in the courthouse and in the role of government, but at the same time don't have to put up with the drudgery of actually running for office. Not yet, at least. There are many in there that may end up being judges and someday be DA or something. But it's been a wild ride to be, I would say, a behind-the-scenes spectator. I wouldn't say I was a spectator either, but behind the scenes of that building and that institution for the past 20 years. And a lot has gone on there, both good and bad.
Yeah. I mean, from a little bit that I do know, I mean, you've handled over 100 murder cases. I mean, that's a lot.
I have. And part of what I've done in my career as an attorney was I joined that office as a young man, I was very much into following the big cases and watching Peter Pawlowski, who was the district attorney when I was a kid. He had come to our high school, and I remember him. It was a SAD program for Students Against Drunk Driving, something like that. And he said during his presentation that he goes to the crime scenes, and he's still an intimidating guy, dark glasses, tall guy. And I was like, man, this guy is badass. Like and had seen him on TV. So I began to follow the cases that were coming through the courthouse. And I dreamt of getting there someday. Some people want to play third base for the Yankees. I dreamt of going to the district attorney's office and with a little bit of hard work and some good fortune, I got there.
So how old were you when you became that interested?
I was in high school at that point, and I had done some things in my life where I was not much of an athlete, but I had the ability to talk. I'm the youngest of four boys, so Italian boys in northeastern Pennsylvania. So you could imagine if you can't talk and fight, you're not going to have a good time. So I enjoyed, and my brothers they're still my best friends in the world, but we were talkers. We always had something to say and loved each other very much, but really spirited debate and conversation in our house. And from a very young age, I enjoyed that process. And I thought, boy, if I can do this for a career and feed my family with it, this is the place,
Yeah. So as a kid, with that, I'll say maybe it was part curiosity, but did you question things? Did you question people? Was that because I'll just say for me, as a kid growing up, I was always the kid that would challenge status quo of anything, whether it was authority, and not in a bad way. I wasn't getting arrested or anything. Let me just preface it, right?
Yeah.
But just I would just be well, why are we doing that? Tell me why we're doing it that way. I would question, that, and as a goofy kid like me, smiling, as a teenager, a lot of teachers, not, I want to say maybe took it the wrong way, but I'll say some trouble as a kid because I was always the smart ass kid who, but just would question things out of, curiosity, but also if I didn't like something, you going back to what you said, it's Well, then I would just say it. Like most people wouldn't.
I certainly did that. I was always in trouble for talking. Always in trouble. I can't keep my mouth shut to this day. I just can't do it. You know, we have things in court where you have to be quiet and listen to the judge talk. I climb the walls during that part.
You still don't do it.
No, I say if I go to a dinner or something I'm speaking at, I say, boring. When do I get to talk? You know, it's just the way I'm built. And it was. I think it's because I'm the youngest of 4 boys. I was fighting for that attention, and but I loved to talk. I loved to communicate with people. I love to talk with people, and certainly that's a major part of what I do. And it's not part of what most attorneys do, believe it or not. You know, many attorneys don't ever see the inside of a courtroom. That was not the kind of practice I wanted.
You wanted to talk.
I wanted to talk. I wanted to be in the courtroom, part of these intriguing cases and taking on these bad guys I grew up watching. I was just fascinated by it. And you can't help but be, whatever it is you're drawn to. I just grew up watching this, and I was so intrigued and fascinated by the crime, the characters, I think, just the drama of it all. And when I tell you, Bill, it played out exactly as I expected it to be. I'm still fascinated. I still sit there. There are times, and a lot of people don't realize, when a murder happens, we are called there. We literally are dispatched by 911. The police call 911, and 911 calls us. So think about where has your career taken you that 911 is actually calling you to go to a scene. And I'll tell you a story. Just this past year, for example, this is the life that I'm living. It was 1 degree outside, and I was watching Elf with my little girl, and she was starting to fall asleep. And my phone starts blowing up. And I know what that means at that hour. Something is afoot. I pick up the phone. It's Lieutenant Robert Lombardo of the Pennsylvania State Police. He's the head of the crime unit. And he said, we have a child dead. And it was 1 degree. I said, where? You need to come get me. It's icing. And I go from holding my little girl on the couch to holding the hand of a dead child, an hour later. And nothing prepares you for that. But this job gives you the opportunity to make that right. And that's the career I chose, partly the career I chose. And that's why I keep doing it after all this time. It's 20 years now. And I didn't set out to do it for 20 years. I think that, but I certainly set out to do it until I felt like it was time to do other things. And I'm not there yet. We're getting there.
But you're close.
We're close.
That's some heavy stuff, man.
Yeah, and that's and that one was particularly jarring. Okay, every day is not like that, but many days are like that. We go to crime scenes. I was on the job for 4 weeks, and our Luzerne County Fair Queen, Carrie Martin, was killed. And I was called to that scene. I was 26 years old and brought to this detached garage where she was killed, and she was lying literally in a pool of blood. And that's not an expression. It was a pool of blood. She had been stabbed 19 times in a botched robbery by 2 individuals who she did not know. And that moment, the guy that entered that garage is not the same guy that walked out. I think for the better, but that moment changed my life. And I knew that I was on a journey now that was going to take a long, long time and was going to be a wild one, but it was one that I was called to do, compelled to do, quite honestly. And I prosecuted that case from the beginning to the literal graves of both of the defendants. And it changed me, and it prepared me for this career.
That's like unbelievable. It's chilling.
It is. It's chilling, but at the same time, I think if you look into the darkness long enough, there is some light that comes. And, in going against these bad guys and bad gals, at the same time, there is inspiration, and you meet amazing people, and you are given the opportunity to make right these horrible things. Nothing could ever change what happened, but there is hope. and the camaraderie that I've been able to build with the teams that I've prosecuted these cases with. I mean, I wouldn't change that for the world. I really wouldn't. And it just makes you who you are, you know. And that was in 2004.
How old were you?
I was 20. Oh boy, I'm 45. So
early
it was in 2004. I was in my early 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot as an early 20-something-year-old. You know, you're probably, you know, you just turning 21. Like, it's like, you know, those are the years that most people, I think, you know, probably as grown up, most people wouldn't ever expect or go into that type of career. Or you wouldn't expect a 20-something-year-old to be witnessing that. And actually, that's what they're doing. Like, that's what you did.
Well, and I think, too, you got to pretend you're a tough guy and then it's not bothering you either. I mean, these are seasoned detectives there at the scene, and they're kind of watching me to say, what's the kid going to do?
What's the new guy?
You don't want to get sick. You don't want, because it's terrible. And the tragedy of it all is overwhelming. So, you know, I kind of kept my emotions in check. And before long, not that you never take emotion out of it, but before long, you get used to what you have to do with those things. And you have to take some of your emotion out of these things. And having done this for so many years and so many times, I see these things from the end now. I go to every crime scene and I think, what is this going to look like in the courtroom? Everything going on right now is going to end up in a pile of boxes in my office. So you have to make sure, take a little bit of a leadership role. There's some infighting when you get there, of course. The coroner's in charge, what state trooper, what local detective is in charge, the district attorney's office is there, and there's a little bit of politics of prosecution. But when you're doing it as long as I've been doing it, you build those relationships where you kind of respect each other, stay in your lane, and let everyone do what they're best at those scenes. So it's very emotional. It is trying, and it damages you over time, but it also makes you stronger.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit, you know, just talking about, you know, your youth a little bit, you know, kind of just, you know, we touched on it a little bit. I want to go back a little further, right? So, you know, you're the youngest of four. And I know, you know, from the little bit that I do know, and the little bit of conversation we had before this, like, family is very important to you. Obviously, I can hear that. You talked about your wife a little bit, you know, your daughter. You know, take me back a little bit to your childhood. And what was that like growing up, you know, as the youngest of four kids?
So I had a wonderful childhood, and we could talk a little bit about my mom and how I ended up here. But I had some tragedy in my life. You know, my dad was a mailman. He worked nights, and like I said, he had four sons, and I was 5 years old. And I'll tell you a quick story. In March of 1983, my father won the lottery. He won $2,500 on the lottery on St. Patrick's Day. And he took the family to Disneyland that August. And on the way home from that trip, I was 5 years old. My father couldn't get comfortable on the airplane. And my father was a runner. He looked like Tom Selleck, my dad. And he couldn't get comfortable because a tumor was pushing on his back. He had no idea. And shortly after that trip, my father was diagnosed with a form of stomach cancer, basically non-treatable. And he was told that he'll be gone in 90 days, basically. And he lived almost 2 years fighting that. His good health actually worked against him, Bill, and kept him alive. So from a very young age, I was 5 at that point. My father had worked nights. I never really had any time with my father healthy. And he was in the hospital essentially from that day forward, and, you know, kept alive by artificial means and just extensive bone marrow transplants, just pure hell. So growing up in that situation, you have to grow up really fast. And as I said, there was 4 of us and my mom. And she was by his side and still would come home from the hospital, take care of us, and go back, just clinging to any hope that he would be able to win this war with cancer. And on February 24th, 1985, he passed away. And it was a game changer. I mean, obviously it was tragic, but it changed the trajectory of all of our lives, you know, and that's where my mom began her journey. And I had a front row seat, and it really colored everything I do to this day.
Wow. Tell me some of those experiences. Like what was it from, you know, losing your father that really made you who you are today?
I think in that point you have 2 options. You know, you have an excuse to be a bum for the rest of your life. You can flunk in school. You can stink at sports. You can not give a shit about anything. Or you can pick yourself up and keep going. And my mother she had a high school education. She had 4 young kids and went to work selling insurance. And she began a career that she knew very little about, but was telling her story. And it was insurance because my dad had taken out a life insurance policy. And when everybody was bringing bills to the house, the insurance salesman brought a check. And he had said to my mom, you should tell your story. You could probably do really well in our business. My mom took over the whole operation in a couple of years, had a tremendous career, has traveled the world, and has told her story all over the world. She's fascinating. She's 77 years old, still very beautiful. And I watched that growing up. That was my teacher, and just watching her take on in the late 80s and early 90s. This was a woman who climbed the corporate ladder with no education, was truly inspiring, and nothing was going to stop her. Like, I never doubted her for a minute. And if you ever get the chance to meet her, you'd know why.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I have the wrong guest sitting across from me. I think it's supposed to be your mom. I goofed up a little here.
She'd be a phenomenal guest. But, and every day starts off with a call to her. If I don't call her, she calls Nicole, my wife, looking for me. She said, "Where's Jarrett? I didn't hear from him. I'm concerned." And she's down in Florida now, several months out of the year, and I still have to check in. And then on those calls, she tells me what my brothers are doing for the day, because everybody calls and checks in. And she's very much involved in our lives still, and still very much someone whose opinion I respect so much because of her life experiences and because of the journey I watched her take. And I was inspired by it. There was not a wall my mother didn't knock down. And, I continue that tradition in my life. And that's not to say I haven't encountered challenges and great difficulty, but I watched that growing up. And no amount of education I've had, no institution that I've attended, no degree I have, came close to that education.
And then nothing can prep you for that.
No.
I mean, you were so young. I mean, obviously, it probably had a tremendous impact on your family, and I'm sure there were a lot of highs and lows during all of that.
Well, there were, and my father asked her to do 2 things. He said, "Don't ever let anyone hit the boys, although we deserved it, and educate them." Imagine this poor guy's dying. He says to her, "Educate the boys." The cost of college is it's pretty tall order. I could tell you, my mom remarried many years later to my stepdad, Charlie, who's a great man, Charles Grimes, and he's a great man and was just a tremendous support to my mom too, but she kept her promises to my dad. Never let anybody certainly hurt us. I don't know that we would have ever stood for that, but and everyone is educated and has families and is doing really, really what they set out to do in the world, and it's a credit to her.
Yeah. Do you feel like as like the youngest, right? I feel like maybe a lot of the youngest of like multiple sibling families feel like maybe like as the youngest one, maybe you didn't have a voice, or you felt like you may have been like, overlooked maybe at some points of your life like that. Do you ever experience that as a kid?
Well, I think she was so busy working, and that's the other thing. I hear parents now, like they're at every practice, it's nuts, we're tied up all weekend with the kids. I'm thinking like, I never had anybody at basketball. I sat on the bench my whole career of everything, but I knew, and I'll tell you, like if there was an empty seat in the stands, I knew why it was empty. She was out there working for us. So I didn't think like, I wish mom was here to watch me sit on the bench.
Yeah.
So I think being the youngest though in that house, no, I never felt like I didn't have a voice. I always fought for my place in the line.
And did you have to beat up your brothers or what?
Well, it was a little bit of that, but they're all tremendous personalities. So it wasn't always easy, but I always had a voice, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm a twin too. So Jason, my twin brother, Jay's a little quieter. He was then, he's not now. So I always had a voice and somebody to listen to me and Jay.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you're always a talker. You're a communicator.
Right.
And the Italian right? I mean, that's it.
Right. Very traditional family, and like I said, I mean, these guys, they could have their own comedy show to this day. So
yeah, I mean, you look like a lawyer. I mean, I'm sure you probably have heard that before.
Is that a good thing, Bill?
Yeah. I mean, listen, like, I don't hate lawyers.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's a lot of people that probably have like misconceptions, right, about, you know, lawyers, right? You know, I would tell you, like, if, you know, I mean, you probably wouldn't be sitting here either if I didn't like, right? Well, but at the same time, like, I mean, you have a lawyer look. I mean, not just the clothes, but I don't know, you just have that. I could feel like you look like you belong in that role.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think there's so many manifestations of this career that, you know, fortunately, I know a tremendous amount of lawyers being in this business in the civil and criminal realm. So there are some that are the stereotypical, I'm doing contract law now, we're having a good time doing this, like I would die doing some of that stuff. But
yeah.
And then there are these folks who have amazing personalities and really fight the good fight every day. And as a prosecutor, and you may not hear prosecutors say this, like, I have this amazing respect for the defense attorneys too, because you want to talk about a tough job. I mean, imagine protecting everyone's rights under the Constitution, and dealing with these folks who are often very difficult, often suffering from drug addiction, often suffering from some mental infirmity, and advocating for those folks. I mean, that's not an easy life either. And you won't always hear someone appreciate the work they do. And I always say, like, those Rocky movies, and I'm a huge Rocky guy, and I said they'd be pretty boring if Rocky was alone in the ring. You know, you need a combatant on the other side, and you need great defense attorneys making sure our system's working. I mean, that's what is separating us from the rest of, or much of the world. We have an opportunity to have just a great advocacy system. Both sides get to be heard, and it's fair. And we have the greatest system in the world. It's not perfect, but I'll tell you, it's the best. I put it up against any system that I'm familiar with. And that's the cool thing about it. And those are lawyers every day, not making a ton of money, working really, really hard, very stressed out.
Yeah, that's another misconception. I feel like, not all lawyers make the kind of money that, you know, maybe movies portray them to be, and the hours and the amount of hours. You just touched on it.
Right. Well, I think there are certainly lawyers that do very, very well, and there are some that are kind of ham and egging it out there. You know, I've had the good fortune to be able to exist in both worlds. I have a law firm here in northeastern Pennsylvania with partners, and have been able to own and operate a law firm and work as an assistant district attorney. I've done that because I've sacrificed half of my soul to the amount of time I work. But it's unique too. There aren't a lot of people that do both. It gives me a unique perspective though.
Yeah, and you do, and I want to hear more of this unique perspective, the experiences that you got. I mean, you know, right before we started, and I'll let you talk about it in a second here, but right before you started, like, you told me, like, you right now in the present time, you know, this episode won't be out for, you know, a few weeks or so, but right now you're handling 8 pending homicides.
So as I sit here, I have 8 murder cases that are pending at various levels through the court. I have probably 100 drug or gun felony cases in my part-time job, yes. I am in the process now, just days away from selecting a homicide jury. So I begin this sad routine that I have when prepping for a trial. So I'm in that mode.
You're in the zone right now.
Very much
so I got you here at like the right time.
Very much. Almost the wrong time. I started tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's nothing but this, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have this routine that lead up to the big trials. And I've been able to do some really, really big trials in my career here, which have been certainly such a big part of my life and my career, and I've had the honor to do it. But I have this routine leading up to it. It's like a 4-week training camp, and so I'm in week 4 of this one.
This is the last leg.
This is as lean as I get. Now I start putting weight back on.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I physically prepare. I mentally prepare. I don't know who else does this. I did it the first time, and it worked. So I've become a little superstitious about it.
Yeah. Well, so I this is probably part of the answer, but I'll say high performers. And you're a high performer, like you at your job, like you are the best, right? Like that's like
I think I'm the best. I don't know. You have to.
Right. Yeah. You don't need me telling you, right?
That's right.
Yeah. But like that's what I mean. Part of it, you know, in my opinion, you know, is is a high performer, like how you say, like, well, I don't know if anybody else does this. Well, guess what? The other people, where the other people are. They're up in the stands.
Well, I say that too. Like, I don't think I'm the best. I want to be the best. And to be the best, you need to be in the arena. And it's funny you say that. I always say that. Like, look, you can judge me. You can say whatever you want. You can hate on me and the way I do my thing. I've been accused of being flashy, over the top. Well, that's fine. You can say that while you're having a hot dog in the stands and I'm down there in the arena with my sword and my shield.
Getting shit done.
Yeah. I mean, and my record speaks for itself. But I couldn't do that without the work. And I certainly couldn't do it without the support of my wife, who has been there for 20 years through the hell that comes with a lot of this too.
Shout out to Nicole.
Yeah. So absolutely. And I just, my life has kind of acquiesced around what I became in my career, which was a person who can handle a lot emotionally and work-wise, but I couldn't do it without the support of Nicole and our kids. We have two beautiful children who have shared their dad with a lot of the bad guys of this community. They have, and it's just something. It's a reality they've had their whole lives.
Yeah. So I mean, you touched on it like a little bit ago, but you said about your work speaks for itself. What is your conviction rate?
Well, it's funny you asked that. So I think. So whenever you ask a prosecutor what their conviction rate is, like you think, oh, he's going to say 100%. He just said he's the best.
Does the answer vary all the time?
That's not a fair question. So like it's a great question. It's one.
Is that like a lawyer question?
Yes.
Is that like a question a lawyer asks?
So let me ask you this. So if you look at my conviction rate is I've won a lot more than I've lost. Let's put it that way.
So you're winning.
So, but if I did one trial and won one trial, I'd have 100% conviction rate. So if you hear a prosecutor say that, and when they run for office, they say that 100% conviction rate.
Well, how long have you been doing it? Yeah.
You know what I say? There's somebody who has not tried enough cases.
Yeah.
But I have, or it's say if you've won 99 and lost one, does that make you a loser? I don't think so, right?
Right.
I think life is a series of games. You want to perform well, you want to win, obviously, but there are some tough ones that if you go in there and give a victim their opportunity to tell their story, there's winning in that. I lost a case earlier this year, and I have not lost many, and those losses stay with me. But that case gave two individuals an opportunity to tell their story about sexual abuse from decades ago. And I'm going to tell you something, Bill. I think most importantly, that's what they wanted. They had their day in court. And in a sense, although we weren't successful in the ultimate conviction, they won. They got their lives back. They got to tell the world their story. And there was some victory in that. So I think when you hear a prosecutor say that, they have not. And the world's changing. People think our job, you walk in, you're the good guys, it's easy. The world has changed. Over 20 years, I'm going to tell you, juries are tougher than they were 20 years ago.
And I'm sure your job, everything now is probably completely different than what it used to be back then.
It is.
Social media, TV, politics.
Absolutely.
You touched on that earlier.
Absolutely. And I think, you should never be wondering what political party.
Right.
What do we hear today? What president appointed this judge? What political party they have? And I'm going to tell you, and fortunately, I don't see a lot of that in the decisions that we see from our court or the manner in which our prosecutors conduct themselves. But certainly that's the last thing that should be on the mind of a jury weighing particular pieces of evidence against the defendant. That's what's frustrating.
Yeah.
I think, and that's changed. The other thing is, it's a war on law enforcement out there. And, I have relationships with so many police officers all over the country. I have friends in the Chicago Police Department, friends down in South Carolina, friends in the federal government that are all over. And it's a war on law enforcement because the world highlights a few bad apples, and the good people that do their job every day and protect their communities, they get glossed over.
They do. They don't get enough credit.
No. And it's sad. The reality is it's going to have a chilling effect on people getting into that career. And, if anything could come out of some of the things I've done or the manner in which I've done this DA thing, I hope I attract people into this business. I try to make it as exciting as I could make it for myself, and I like push it on people. I'm like, you got to try and come to the DA's office or go to the public defender's office, because it is exactly, in many respects, like you see on TV. It's exactly like that. You want to try cases in front of a jury. You want a bad guy. You want to see the rows of inmates coming in shackles and prosecuting people and righting the wrongs in the community. You're going to get the opportunity to do that in this job. And it may not be pretty every day, but my God, if we can get good people back into that business, this community would be a better place too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's there's a lot of good and bad everywhere, but we touched on it just a tiny bit, but like, the red tape everywhere, and whether it's politics or not, but just like there's a lot of like just, people like you said earlier, people may not, like me because I'm flashy or this or that, or the haters and this, and there's just a lot of roadblocks, and it's frustrating. But like the one thing that I really like about you is like you are so, I'll say, obsessed with, and this is a good thing. It's a compliment, right? Don't get scared. But like you're obsessed with what you do, and it shows in your work. And like again, from what I know about you and the cases, all the cases that you've handled and everything that you have going on, the part-time, full-time, like you do probably 10 times, like literally 10 times more than the average person. And like I can appreciate that, even though what we do is completely different, except you did start a podcast recently. We'll talk about that soon. But a lot of people always say to me too, like, Bill, how do you do all this stuff? How do you do all this stuff? And it's like, well, I say, like, that's the word I use. I'm obsessed with it. Like I don't just like it. I don't just love it. Like I'm obsessed with it. And like you said earlier, like I want to be the best.
That's true. It is an obsession, and it's a healthy obsession for the most part. Sometimes it's unhealthy because you can't turn it off. I'll be at a basketball game for my son, and this is a true story, and you're with all the other dads and everybody's sitting around, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, how many of these guys are stuck in between two serial killers right now, willing to testify against each other and figuring out what the hell to do with it. And that's the life I chose. I get it. And I'm sure they have their own problems, but it never really leaves you. And 20 years of doing this, I have a tough time relaxing. I have a tough time with bright lights these days. I have a tough time with loud noises and strong smells, and I know what it is. These are the scars of 20 years of ghosts and bad guys that stay with me. And you might say to yourself, like, I'm not complaining. Believe me, I would not have what came from it if I didn't have what bad comes with it too. And I think that's part of it. It was worth it. It was well worth it. And whatever the next chapter is, there's going to be a degree of obsession there. And I don't know any other way. Quite honestly, this isn't a noble trait. I don't know any other way. I think that I love what I do. I'm not ashamed to say it. I love the fact that we're in the papers. I love the fact that people are interested in what I do. And if that's wrong, well, then I'm wrong. So be it. I didn't come there to be humble. And when I got to the DA's office, there had been like editorializing in the papers, and it was kind of like a little bit of a war on the office. They weren't the most respected department inside that courthouse. And for a lot of different reasons, political reasons and things of that nature. And when I got there, I thought to myself, my God, I got this shiny badge, and I how come I don't have a parking spot here at the courthouse? It's like, no, you park over there with everybody else. You know? And I thought, I am going to beat respect into the people that work in this building. And I'm going to show them that the DA's office aren't the redheaded stepchild of this building. And I'm going to show them that there are ADAs that will work hard and bring this place back into better area of respect. And I think with the journey I went on with my colleagues, it wasn't just me, but that was my thinking. I'm like, you know what? There's one way to build respect. Show people that you're serious. Show people that you're prepared. Show people that this is not a joke and that you're going to take on these big cases. And then as I was there, fortunately for the office, we attracted just this onslaught of great talent that I had the opportunity to work with and have become friends for life. I was in that job 6 weeks, and then young Dave Pedri comes in.
Dave Pedri.
So Dave comes in, and I met Dave for the first time, and I said, "Kid, I'll take you under my wing." I was there a whole 6 weeks, and Dave was my partner in the DA's office, and we would routinely bite off way more than we can chew. And he very much wanted the same thing. He wanted the opportunity to take on big cases and just grow professionally. And that kind of a career, be it the DA's office or the public defender's office or the conflict office, is where you can do it. I wasn't going to win the yellow page war. I wasn't going to win these multi-million-dollar verdicts at that point. I wanted to get in there and do some good and build a reputation that hopefully was an example to our community that people care. People are going to fight for you if you're wronged, if you're robbed, if a loved one is killed, if your child is hurt. That was the dream I had, and I was given the opportunity to do it. And I hope to think, or I like to think, I did it.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a hell of a lot of stuff. I mean, I want to go back a little and maybe talk about a couple cases. I mean, one that stands out for me, and the reason I remember it specifically, Hugo Selenski. The reason I remember is because when I was in high school at the time, and I forget what grade I was in, but I remember
You're making me feel old.
Yeah, sorry about that. But one of my high school teachers, he was one of the jurors. So he was out for a while, and then when he came back, and I only remember bits and pieces of the story of like what he said, but I'll say he shared a lot of afterwards. Obviously, he was able to speak about it, but I got the experience of hearing from him. What it was like as a juror, and just actually like hearing like everything, all the case basically.
He had a front row seat.
Yeah, and I know like you were involved. Like that was early on for you, right?
So it began early on. I had the Hugo Selenski case for 9 years. So the story, we back up a little bit if you don't mind, but Selenski came on the scene in June of 2003. Mm-hmm. He was arrested then, and that was when they executed the warrant on his property and found the remains of at least 5 people. I was a law student then, just finishing law school. I took a position as a clerk in Lackawanna County, and I remember just being totally, totally blown away by this story. And I became an attorney. I had gotten my law license. I took the bar exam and passed. Ironically, the day he escaped, or was found after he escaped, it was the same day. And something very much attracted me to that case. I remember the night Hugo had escaped, and Nicole and I were out to dinner, and we came home, and she was scared. I think everybody in the community was scared, and she put a chair in front of the door of our townhouse at the time. And I said to her, and I had no reason to think this at that point, I said, for some reason, I think this is going to become my problem. And many years later, it did.
It did. A decade.
It did. But again, when we were in school, prosecution school, a DA said to us, the worst words a prosecutor can hear is the word high profile. And I thought to myself, it is? That's like saying we only want to win regular season games. We don't want to win the Super Bowl.
Too risky.
Right. And I was just so intrigued by much of what was coming out, and our whole community was. This was a gripping case. You had multiple victims, and some of the victims had long ties to this community, had their own stories. So when Selenski came on the scene, I was attracted to this particular series of events. I was interested in it, and it's really what brought me to the district attorney's office. And I came in there as a rookie. I had no business thinking I would have anything to do with a case of this magnitude. I go in for my job interview, and I kept saying to myself, do not bring up the Selenski case. Don't bring up the Selenski case, So I go in with Dave Lupus and Jackie Carroll, and within 5 minutes, I was asking about the Hugo Selenski case.
Of course you were.
And they're kind of looking at each other like, what does this kid think he's talking about? Lo and behold, 9 years later, I had the case and prosecuted him with our DA, Sam Sanguinolci, at the time. But I'll tell you, I didn't have the first one. And in 2006, Selenski was acquitted of murder. And my journey began on that day. He was arrested in that courtroom that day on the new set of charges, the murders of Tammy Fassett, Michael Krakowski. And from March of 2006 through March of 2015, that was a major part of my life. I basically played chess with Selenski and the multitude of lawyers that he had and the many judges that we had. It was a 9-year journey. And this case was 30,000 pages of material. I would say maybe 300 plus interviews, multi-jurisdictional investigations. And all the while he was laughing at the office and trying to put on this brave face about, he was going to beat the office. He was going to do this. He was going to beat the charges. And for me, I just kept pushing. And worked really hard with Sam, the late Gary Capitano. And that case really changed my life. I mean, it changed good and bad, I would say, but for the most part, very good.
Yeah, I need to hear some stories because I remember just in the community, I remember there was women that were just rallying around him, just random people that just thought because he was good looking. I remember, and maybe you can touch on some of this, but there was just so much, like you said, the high profile. There was so much going on.
It was a circus, and it was a circus that.
On the Stacks will be back in a flash after a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Elevation Wellness, NEPA's premier wellness center located on Mundy Street in Wilkes-Barre. From pro athletes to busy parents, Elevation Wellness is leading the conversation when it comes to bettering your health through integrative medicine. Founded by NEPA native Louis Helmecke, Elevation Wellness offers physician-formulated and guided treatments that are administered by registered nurses. To learn more about how you can experience the benefits of IV vitamin therapy, multivitamin booster shots, non-invasive aesthetics, or peptide, NAD, red light, and compression therapy, visit elevation-wellness.com or follow them on Instagram at Elevation Wellness NEPA. All On the Stacks listeners will receive 10% off their first purchase with code STACKS at checkout. Call 570-762-9400 or visit elevation-wellness.com to book your appointment today. Elevation Wellness, taking your health to new heights.
A lot of times when people are in car accidents, kind of forget what we should do. First and foremost, call 911. Then, get out of your car before moving it and take pictures. It's so important to capture what the cars look like immediately following the accident. Finally, call your insurance carrier and make a claim.
To learn more, visit Anzalone Law offices online at anzalonelaw.com. And now we're back on the Stacks.
He is a dynamic, charismatic figure. He is, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think there's a sociopathy there. But I got to know him over the course of 9 years as well. I mean, the only one that was on the case for 9 years was myself, Detective Capitano, Trooper Sackney, and Hugo himself.
Yeah.
So
I need to hear this.
We all kind of had this in common. We all were part of this dirty little secret. And it never left my mind. When I tell you, during those 9 years, by the way, I got married, became a father twice, started my business, and was routinely preparing to take on Selenski in the courtroom.
So you had this was a major decade of your life. Major decade.
And looking back now, a couple of stories. I'll tell you some stories. So the first time we ever spoke, Selenski and I, we were in the courtroom, and there was a changing at the district attorney's office, and D.A. Salvantis had defeated D.A. Jackie Musto Carroll at that point. That was on a Tuesday. That Thursday, we were in court, and D.A. Carroll, the case was going to be moved, and D.A. Carroll was not going to be the prosecutor, but she was present in court that day, and I had gone up to the bench, and Selenski was going to ask for a continuance. And he looked over at me and he said, "Last man standing, not Ferentino," because our whole team had been decimated at that point. I looked over at him and I said, "When this is over, I'm going to be the last man standing." And he looked back at me and he said, "A lot of people thought that." And it was game on from there. I think my role became much more face forward at that point. But I can tell you, Bill, I enjoyed that journey. I enjoyed that fight. Certainly the victory was sweet, but I was honored to be a part of that case with the detectives and the lawyers and the intense legal issues that we dealt with. It was a game changer. I don't know that anyone who's ever been a part of something that big and with that many tentacles, you never really get over it. And there was a part of you that's missing when it's over. It was just such a big part of your life. There's not a day that goes by. I would venture to say several times a day, I think about him. I think about his victims. I think about his family. It was just such a big part of my life that good and bad thoughts, One thing I can tell you too, Mrs. Kurkowski, everything comes back to moms, man.
It does. It always does.
There's something.
Always.
But Michael Kurkowski was killed by Hugo Selenski. And he had these beautiful parents. They were elderly, Jerry and Michael Kurkowski. And for whatever reason, they had approached me. I was fourth chair on the case, by the way, which meant like I'm the fourth guy deep on this case. I met them when the new charges were brought in 2006. They told me I was the one they trusted for whatever reason on the team. I'm like, great. And Mr. Kurkowski passed away sometime after that. And we went to his wake and expressed our condolences in person to Mrs. Kurkowski. And this was a woman whose life was just bound by tragedy. Her son had died, and she had lived through this, Hugo becoming like a rock star. And she said to me, promise me here at Michael's casket that you're going to make this right, that you're going to get him, and you won't leave until it's over. And I said, I won't. And we got out in the car. It was like Pedri and I and Dave Lupus. I said, well, I just made a promise I can't break.
Yeah.
And I said, did she make you guys promise? And they said, no, what are you talking about? And that was a special commitment I made. And one time she asked me, she said, why do they take his picture? Like he's a movie star. And I said to her, when this is over, they're going to take our picture, you and me. And I had no business making that promise. But I remember the day after he was convicted, I got up. I felt like it was a dream. You can imagine something terrible, living with it for 9 years and waking up that next day saying, is it really over? And I went down to get the newspaper, and I opened up the paper. And on the cover of the paper was a picture of me and Mrs. Kurkowski. And that picture hangs in my office to this day as a reminder, and I'm going to tell you something, Bill. I saw that picture in my mind many of those years, and it was a motivating factor for me. I knew that, for that moment we were going to make her the rock star, and
so you manifested this.
I did.
You planted the moment you made that promise to her. You had that picture. It was already snapped in your mind, and you were just carrying it out.
I saw it crystal. When I tell you I saw that picture crystal clear in my mind. And I'm going to tell you, you said it. That's the magic word. I manifested it. I manifested much of what I have what I have been fortunate enough to get in my life or have in my life. As part of it is because I live very much in between my ears and my imagination and manifesting, and that is one of the many things I've been able to do that with in my life. And that image, that hope, that prayer is really what kept Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, and that's what it was. I was like, look, man, you got to make this right. This guy has been talking smack on the DA's office for all these years, and you're listening to Hugo's going to beat you guys. And man, everybody would give me a hard time over it, or tease me about it. And, fortunately we were able to make it right. And he's doing 2 life sentences in jail, and it worked out, sadly though, there were victims in that case that, looking back now, it just did so much damage. It broke his family. It broke the families of his victims. It broke many of the investigators, Bill. I mean, people never recovered from that. It was so awful. And they don't typically go on that long. And it went on that long because of the novel legal issues we were dealing with.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, to hear some of these things after like seeing it, in the news, and experiencing just little bits and pieces, like it's like it's like surreal to hear it from you.
It is. And I think the story's never really been told chronologically. I think people know many pieces of the story, but they don't know the whole story. Sadly, I do. And it's an amazing story. I mean, you want to talk about a life that has had an impact. It was fascinating. It was fascinating to me, and I was the one putting him away. It was just an amazing journey that we all took together. And then Gary Capitano was the lead investigator on that case. And Gary was a Marine, just a hard-ass guy. He was a detective at the DA's office. He was tough. And, I built a relationship with him through those 9 years. Oftentimes it was tough. When our son Dominic was born, Gary came into the room and Nicole was sleeping. And he'd been sitting out front of the room with his detective gun on. I don't know what he thought he was doing out there, but it was like at 9:30, 10 o'clock the night after Dominic was born. And he came in, he said, "I'm going home, kid." And I said, "I didn't even know you're still here. What are you doing here?" His life was that case, and he was just protecting, our little boy. And he said to me, "I hope this doesn't make you soft now." I said, "No, Gary, this is going to make me harder. Don't worry." And then he said, "And by the way, that baby looks Irish." But this case was at all of those critical points of my life. I look at pictures of us. We lived in this little townhouse, and I look at pictures, and Dominic will be playing with his toys, and off in the corner are these stacks of binders. I know what those binders are. It was the case.
They're Hugo binders.
It was the case. And I said, I'm either going to fall flat on my face here, or this is going to be something that changes my life. And fortunately, it went our way. And to have had the opportunity to do that with Sam and our team and Mamie Phillips, who was another one of the, if I don't mention Mamie, I'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
But again, rightfully so, Mamie worked really hard with us. And it was just an amazing journey. And Michelle Giza, another just unsung hero of the DA's office. And I'll tell you, what burns me up? We're talking about unsung heroes. These are the folks you never hear about. It's one thing for me, hey, this has been good for me. I think that it's nice to be associated with a case that went your way. Sure. Believe me.
Yeah.
But there are so many people that work so
behind
hard
the
there.
scenes.
Oh, my
behind
God.
the scenes.
I mean, we stand on their shoulders. Believe me when I tell you, I'm showy at times, but I'd be nothing without that support system and the people we rely on personally and professionally.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I'm the same way. It's, we were talking a little before the show, and everybody always asks me, everybody always thinks "Oh, Bill, so after this, how do you edit the show?" And I said, "I don't." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Well, I don't do it." I said, "Somebody else does." And they're like, "Really?" "Oh, I thought you did it all." I said, "No." I said, "Listen," I said, "if I had to do all this stuff myself," I said, "we wouldn't be sitting here right now. That's it." Right. And so shout out to Eric Curtis. He's our, producer, editor. And, without that team, and my wife too, shout out to my wife, has nothing to do with the show, but just, spouse support, right? And just like you said before, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be able to do everything that I do.
That's how the sausage is made, right?
That's it. It's all the people behind the scenes. And I often always like to give all those people credit, because like you said, it's the people behind the scenes or the people sitting in the corner right now on the stool that make the things go.
Well, I'll tell you, living that for all those years, and at the same time getting married, having a family, there were some dark moments.
I bet.
When I tell you, I would sit alone contemplating whatever issue we were dealing with, because there were so many novel legal issues that were just almost too much to bear sometimes. And my wife, Nicole, is a chiropractic physician. She's a professional. She had her own clinic. So she was running her own business while raising our children and dealing with these people coming to the house constantly. We were always on the news, always doing this, and it was controversial. And we were getting in over our heads sometimes. Had she not had her own personal and professional life going on, I wonder would she have been able to understand. And she was always there. I mean, there were some dark times, man, and we were scared. There were times where I was threatened. Different times in my cases, we've had police at the house, watching the house. I've had 2 riots break out in the courtroom. She's been there, and the kids have been there through all of that. And I'm going to tell you, there's not a Ferrari parked in the driveway because of the work I've done there. I could tell you, a lot of it was about just making some wrongs right. This didn't end up buying the house or buying the cars. That was done another way. So there was just a tremendous amount of love and support there that I could not have done it without them, without Nicole and without Dominic and Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine some of the things you went through and just the amount of like you said, the work, all the things behind the scenes and the pressure that you were under.
But I enjoyed it. I never complained. I can't stand complainers. I cannot stand complainers. I never complained because I took this was something I volunteered for. Nobody said, "Hey, Jarrett, you're this great lawyer." Now believe me, nobody wanted anything to do with this case.
Yeah.
I volunteered because I saw what it could be, and I knew, well, here's the thing. People should see their life as a story. Okay? I see my life as a story. I was dealt a tough blow early on, but I've been given a mouth that could pretty much fight me out of anything. I'm going to use it. Give me a brick, I'm going to use it in a fight, right? So I use my voice. Okay, so in my story, what am I doing with my voice? I'm given the opportunity. One time I said to Hugo Selenski, I said, the difference between me and everybody else in this courtroom, Hugo? I said, I choose to be here. And he said, why? And I said, because you're the big bad wolf. That's what he used to call himself in the papers. And he laughed, but I think it troubled him a little bit. I said, I choose to be here because, you've painted yourself into a corner here. You've blown yourself up. And any prosecutor worth their salt wants to take this case on and be a part of this and that it goes well. And all the while, too, I have to say, Bill, through those 9 years, in addition to getting married, building a business, having kids, there were dozens of murders in between that I tried and prosecuted, all the while getting ready for that ultimate one, at that time. So it never stopped. And then when it was over, I didn't know how to stop. So I just kept going. The only time I ever sat and actually thought about all this stuff was during COVID. The courthouse closed and everything closed and people weren't killing each other for some reason, right? And I could actually feel my brain healing. And I was starting to sit and reminisce a little bit.
And it sunk in a little.
A little, but that didn't last very long. Then the world opened back up. But tragically, 2 years ago, Detective Capitano, my buddy, my partner in crime, I got a call in July on our way back from vacation from Sam. And he said that Gary passed away, and very suddenly. And it was just a shock, and losing him, was sad. And, he was somebody he was a confidant of mine and a mentor in many respects. But I got the chance to eulogize Gary at the courthouse, and I told a lot of the stories, of those 9 years where we were together. And but there was so much that has changed since then, but it's still very much with me in everything I do.
Yeah. So just from hearing the little bits and pieces of the the conversation between you and Hugo, and and those little moments that you shared, to me from an outsider's perspective, but just hearing some of these things, it sounds to me like a lot of this too was it was a mental battle. It was a mental battle of who was gonna be able to see it through and actually make it out of the other side.
In my mind, it was a mental battle. I think he was fighting the cops, fighting all his own lawyers on the other side. But it's certainly in my mind, I was playing chess with both he and Mr. Weekly, who was his co-conspirator. Mm-hmm. I think it was, at least that's how I saw it. That's how it felt. And when you're dancing with sociopaths, you're juggling grenades.
Yeah.
And that's many days it felt that way. It really did.
That's wild. It's just that conversation. I mean, just having that conversation with him, the things he said to you, even from the moment you said you met him, it's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean,
there were some awkward moments. There were some interesting moments, but there were human moments too. I'm not a person who hates. I don't hate anyone. I certainly don't hate him. I hate what he did.
I was going to ask you, do you have this hatred for him?
No.
I mean, you answered the question already, but.
No, I think, first of all, that would give somebody like him too much power over you. I think I don't have the time or the inclination to spend my time hating anyone. I don't. And I never did. I certainly treated him fairly and with respect, appropriately. there were times he was his own lawyer, so we kind of had to talk to each other and we had to deal with each other.
That's so wild, by the way.
Yeah, it was. But it's those moments were unique and interesting, but I never let my guard down. I never forgot who I was dealing with, and certainly what he was charged with. But, he had a loving and supportive family too. And that's what made his crime so vexing too, because, he has good siblings and the next generation of their family, and even the next generation. Like, when you're on this case for 9 years, I did get to meet his children and their children. And like I said, you can't paint everyone. People love to oversimplify everything. Oh, what must they be like? Or what must this person be like? They're good people. They're good people.
Yeah, people are people at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I think. And one thing with the podcasting world, and I know I already said it once before, but you're now into it too, but like, something about the podcasting world, it's like, I've had really famous people on. I've had just, I'll say, average people, whatever scale you want to say. Not that one person's more important than the other, but like just, having these interactions with people like we're doing right now. And again, but just some of the people I've had on, everyone's always like, oh, what was that person like? And I'm like, he was just a regular person.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's like we sat across from the table from each other, Jarrett, just like you and I are doing right now. And we're just having a conversation. And it's like, people are like, were you nervous? I'm like, no. I'm like, we're just two humans.
I think, the spoken word is replacing the written word. I think we live our lives via text. We live our lives in these social media platforms and this clickbait and everything else. And all of a sudden there's this new technology emerging where, my God, 11 million people a day are downloading a 3-hour interview with Joe Rogan.
Like, who has the time to listen to all this? And it's it's happening.
It was so cool when I saw you come onto the scene locally. I'm like, wow, people are actually getting an opportunity.
I think you reached out to me at some point, and I think you sent me a message at some point. I forget when it was. Might have been like a year or two ago.
Bill, please have me on. I got a lot to say.
Yeah, no, I think you just genuinely, you just reached out like, hey man, this is cool what you're doing. Nice job. And like, that was like kind of it.
Well, it's not easy to do anything. This is a tough place sometimes.
It is.
I love this region. I love the people. I grew up here, and my goal was to return here to Pittston along with my friends, a group of my friends that I went to high school, college, and law school with. We wanted to come home, start our careers here, and raise our families here. And this is a tough place, though. There's a lot of, when you step out, you lay bare. My little girl, we started our podcast, and my little girl will come in and go, Daddy, you only have 5 views. I was like, we just put it out, and 4 of the views are myself and my 3 brothers. But there's a vulnerability there.
Yeah.
You're nervous. You're like, what am I doing? This is like, and you could just see like, oh, there's only 200 people watching Jarrett's podcast. Like, yeah, I told you he wasn't going to make it.
Yeah, then people just shit on you.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I always say like, or I'll tell the kids, the people who do the best have the most haters. What I mean? Like, it's
true.
Just, whatever. It's like, I enjoy this process. And I said, like, I always felt like there was more to say than was being said. And I've had the good fortune of being a true crime commentator since Selenski. A friend of mine, was covering the trial. He's an investigative journalist from New York City, and one of the things in the courtroom was there was a stranger in the courtroom. I had to know who everybody was, and this guy was sitting with the press pool, and I said, "Go find out who that is over there." I wanted to make sure it wasn't an investigator I didn't know about or something. And his name is Steph Watts. He was an investigative journalist with Court TV, Fox, etc. So I did the opening statement, and he comes up to me in the hallway, and he says, "I'm going to put you on television." And I'm like, "Yeah, you say that to all the girls, you BSer, right?" And I kind of blew him off. I said, "Hey, we'll talk after the trial, man. Nice to meet you." That was in 2015. I don't think there's a day that's gone by I haven't talked with Steph, or he calls me 3 or 4 times a day. And I've had the opportunity to do true crime TV now as a legal analyst, which I love.
Yeah.
But even then, you can go sit down for a 3-hour interview, and the 2020 or ID Network, whatever is going to be on, and the popcorn and the kids, we're all sitting by the TV, and you're on for 2 minutes, and they're like, "Dad, you were only on for 2 minutes."
Like, what the heck? I thought you told us so much more about it. Like, what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a buzzkill, but at the same time, it's been great to have had that opportunity. And I've been to New York doing this, and I enjoy it so much because I love telling these stories. Whether it's in front of a jury, I love telling the story of these cases or just doing it now, on television or on our own in our podcast now.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the show.
So the show is called True Crime Boss. It's a little play on some of what's gone on in the Pittston community over the years. But really, it's just an opportunity. It's just a monologue show. It's just me. I take the biggest cases that people are talking about, and I do a monologue about what I expect to see, what I think the defense attorneys are going to do, what I think the prosecutors are going to do, what jumps out in the particular case to me. And I analyze it. And I think that I try to be funny sometimes. Sometimes they land, sometimes they don't. But I enjoy it. And I'm going to tell you, unexpectedly, as I'm heading toward the end of my DA career, this is kind of feeling the same way. Like I'm telling these stories. I'm getting to drop my one-liners.
Just in a different way.
Yeah. So I think it'll fill the void when that time comes to have the show and just be a part of it.
Yeah, it's exciting. So how did you get started?
Well, I was kind of disenfranchised by what I was seeing, like those 2-minute clips that were coming out on 2020 or those shows that I was honored to be a part of, but I felt wasn't enough. It wasn't getting to what I was really thinking, and I wanted, and I'm a podcast fan. I'm a podcast fan. I enjoy all kind of podcasts on various topics. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to get my own. I would listen to some in my car and I'd say, like, I think I could do a better job than that. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my car not doing it. So I was able to put it together and I'm enjoying it very much.
Yeah, man. Congrats on it, by the way.
Thanks.
Just launched.
Yeah. So we have 6 views now, not just 5.
Okay, yeah. Now I'll pull it up on a couple different TVs here, monitors, so I'll give you a couple more, all right?
Yeah, but there's no shortage of cases you want to cover, and that's been a lot of fun too. So.
Yeah. So how do you pick those? Are people send you suggestions, or is ones just that interest you? Is it a mix?
A little bit of both. I do the Nancy Grace show. I've been on her show, almost on a weekly basis now.
I've heard you on that one. Yeah.
Nancy covers the gripping cases of the day, so I do preparation for that. So at that point, I'm already looked into a case, and Nancy has a lot of guests on. So if you get a couple comments in, then I'll do an episode maybe on that case. But really, there's cases that intrigue me personally, and I think if it's intriguing me after all this time, it's going to intrigue our viewers and listeners. So that's kind of how I pick them.
Yeah. So during your show, like, are you going to talk about any of the ones that you've been part of, or are you just picking up strictly other ones like?
Well, I think
you're not attached to.
I think we're going to get there. I think eventually we're going to do.
I think people would probably want to hear that because we touched on some a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I think just last week, my little girl and I, they had the dedication of the DJ Mo Day in Wilkes-Barre, and I was there, and the mayor came, and DJ Mo was Michael Only. He was a community activist, a local DJ.
I remember, yeah.
He was killed in a drive-by shooting by these 2 guys that were retaliating for being thrown out of Outsiders nightclub. And the case was cold for a while. We solved the case, we prosecuted it, and these 2 guys were convicted. Like that's a story that not a lot of people know. Like that's just one of those cases that, boy, I'd love to tell that story. And I'd love to tell the Kerry Martin story and some of the cases that I've had. And, just last week it was the 10th anniversary of the DJ Mo killing. And I was there with my little girl at this dedication. And she said, the mayor was talking and he was saying it had been 10 years that day. And she said, "Daddy, you're crying." And I didn't even realize it, but I was taken back to that place, to your emotions, just your personal investment into these cases. I got to know Michael's family, and the 2 guys I sent away for the rest of their lives were young guys who made stupid decisions that night, and I knew their families. And it's like, look, I don't sit around and cry for these folks, but people will tell you, keep your emotion out of it. Try it. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. But I was just there, and like the tears came back. I was like, boy, oh boy, here we are 10 years later. Those guys are in jail for the rest of their lives. Michael Only is still gone, and we're here remembering him. It was just, it got me. And I'm there holding her little hand, standing there, and it was a different experience.
Surreal.
It is. And, I try to be a tough guy, but
you still are though. Yeah.
I'm an emotional guy too. I'm one that's, I get invested in these things. Yeah. And there it was 10 years later. You're just like, my God, this still breaks me up because it was such a tragedy.
Yeah. And you're so real too. I feel like a lot of people, and maybe positions that you just don't want to really open up and talk, and as public facing as you are, sometimes people like you may hide behind, your role.
I don't know any other way to be. I think that if you're not committed and you're not being genuine, how are you going to get a jury to believe it?
Right.
If you don't believe it, if you're not willing to invest that piece of yourself,
you gotta be obsessed.
How is anybody going to say, like, this guy doesn't give a shit? Why am I going to care?
Yeah.
And that means there are times I yell in court. There's times I get emotional in court. I've prosecuted a lot of baby murders. I mean, I never thought I was going to be doing that kind of stuff. And they tear you apart. Believe me. And the other thing, Bill, we go to the autopsies. I've been to children's autopsies. And then you got to go home or go out with friends for dinner that night, and everybody's talking about, hey, how's your fantasy football going? It's like, great. I just watched a 4-year-old get post-mortem examination, and it's just, it's a lot.
You can't even talk about that.
Like, you don't.
And no one can even relate.
No.
That's I feel like, for me looking at it from an outside, right? There's hardly anyone that could probably ever even relate. You can't even talk to people about this.
No, and something, like, there's people out there fighting wars. Believe me, this is not the world's smallest violin playing for the prosecutors, but you know what? There's a component of this job that no one talks about.
Yeah.
This secondary trauma that so many, I see it. I see prosecutors that are drinking too much. I see prosecutors whose marriages are falling apart. I see prosecutors who are burned out. And it's because the worst thing that happens to someone is put upon you to make it right. And when that's over, guess what? You got a new one next week.
Do it again.
And you got a box full of them over and over again.
Yeah.
And these are those lawyers of the world. You don't hear about them. You just don't. I talk about this I think it was last year. Nancy Violi-Smocki, who was a prosecutor in Luzerne County, one of the toughest prosecutors you will come across. She had spent her career prosecuting the perverts of the world, the child molesters of the world, and she did a hell of a job. Nancy's tough. I'm afraid of Nancy, right? And all the while raising her own family. She retired after 20 years. There was a blurb in the county news. Nancy Violi-Smocki submitting a letter of intent to retire. Period. And there are other people in this community that when they retire, they throw a ticker parade. And folks that, run nonprofits or this or that. And I think to myself, like,
come on.
I think to myself, like, my God, this community is a safer and better place because of the work she and the people in that office put in. Mm-hmm. And there are just so many of those unsung heroes, and you see that. And there was just something about that just jumped out at me. And I thought, boy, when I go, I'm not going quietly.
Yeah.
But I just thought to myself, like, I know the toll that these took on Nancy. I know the bad guys she put away. And I thought to myself, like, how about a little article summing up her career?
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Something.
And I don't know that she'd even want that. She's a humble person.
Yeah, but just acknowledge her.
My God. And I thought, like, and that's, ironically enough, I remember starting there and saying to myself, when you leave, what will be said? Will you have made your mark? Will you have been, will the fact that you were here ever be noticed, And I always see things from the end. What are they going to say when you're gone from here? Or what are the cases that have made a mark here? I don't know.
Do you have the answer?
I don't care about that as much anymore. I think so. I think that the folks that have had the chance to work with me directly are going to know how much I loved them and respected them and cared about the work. Some will have a lot of a uniquely different experience, I think, because I don't have a lot of patience for fools. I don't suffer fools. I don't, some people, be it in the DA's office or the public defenders, it's like a barbershop where people don't cut hair. It's like, how about get in there and do it? A tree talks about the fruit that it bears, not the fruit that it doesn't grow, and I think there's a lot of that. But at the same time, my goal really is to have left a body of work and an example for people that are still there. And hopefully, if I could inspire somebody to do this kind of work, make it a little bit more fun and interesting, that'd be a great goal.
Yeah. Out of this, the last 20 years of all of this, right? And I know it's a lot, right? What would you say you learned most from it that you're going to take on to your next chapter, your life?
Don't give up. Just keep pushing. Stay goal oriented. Manifest those things. We talked about Sisyphus pushing that rock. I'm halfway up now, I think. When I get there, I'm hoping there's another hill, a bigger challenge. And I mean that. I cannot imagine not having a big fight or a big challenge to be a part of. I'm a little nervous about that when things change, but
you need it.
But it's at the same time too, Bill, in order to grow, you need to move on. You can't stay in the same place either. I've had gangbangers, rapists, serial killers, wife killers, baby killers. Like, you get to a point where, like, all right, this is becoming a little redundant now. It's time to move on. That part of my life I'm ready to move on with and find some other challenges, whatever they are.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see everything that's to come here. I mean, I know a little bit. You got now you got the podcast, and man, I'm excited to see it on this journey. Now I have another podcast brother in the area.
Well, listen, like and subscribe to the YouTube page,
right.
But we need some
Don't
viewers.
Worry, yeah. Everybody go out there and create a couple new Gmails.
That's right. That's right.
Get on there. Where can people listen to the show?
The show is available on YouTube and Spotify. It's True Crime Boss, and you can get there on JarrettFerentino.com. You know how many people ask me, it's amazing, Bill, I'm sure you get the same thing, how do we find your show? And I say to them, look, if you're having difficulty at this point, I don't know that this is the show for
let's
you.
Move on. Let's move on. Let's move on.
But it's there. It's JarrettFerentino.com.
It's full video.
User-friendly.
And it's full video.
Full video.
So
I know,
everybody that gets to see you here now, we get to go see you over there. And
that's right.
Yeah. I'm excited for you, man.
No, thanks, Bill. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, man. I feel like we've only scratched the surface here. There's just so much, and I'd love to have you back on the show at some point down the road. And I know beforehand too, you even you were already recommending guests to me before as soon as you walked in the door, which I greatly appreciate.
Well, I know a lot of characters, Bill. That's for sure.
Listen, I love characters. I need characters, so whenever you're ready to make some recommendations, please do. So I'd love to have some of your characters on the show.
I told you, life's a story. Mine's full of characters. Believe me, and you can have a show every day with some of these people.
Yeah, good. Well, send me some of those after. But it's kind of cool to see how you said, and you touched on this a lot. And I think even though you and I are completely different things, but now we're both in the same field, right? Even though we both have different backgrounds, but you just talked about telling people's stories, and everything you've ever done, everything you've ever been part of, it's always telling a story. And, and it's what I do here too. And like you and I, just to be able to connect with somebody like you, it's just fascinating to me, because like we're both, we're both telling, maybe different stories, right? But there's a lot of crossover. A lot of similarities.
Sure it is. There is. Don't you agree though that you got to see life that way?
You have to.
And you're either the hero or villain in your story, and then all of a sudden these other stories come in and you become part of them.
And you face these crossroads.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It's incredible.
There's the dad story, the dance dad story, the prosecutor story, all those different stories. And you hope none of them are tragedies, but I have been blessed, again, like I said. None of this would be possible without, my family and Nicole and the kids and everybody around me who've just been a tremendous support. And I sit here because of them. They're the ones who really sacrificed. Yeah.
It's just incredible. And I think it's a testament to everything that you've done, for you to get where you are, and to see to hear you have these, these goals to still this, I also have sort of a similar mindset, not that, it's not enough. But it's always what's next?
Right.
What's next?
Right. And you need to ask that. If you're not asking that question, just dig the 6-foot hole yourself.
R.I.P.
You got it.
Right.
I mean, I relish the journey. I relish the fight.
The process. You said the process. I love that you kept saying that, by the way. I kept meaning to ask you that every time you said the process, because you've said that several times during the show. And I didn't want to interrupt some of your stories because they were great, but I just want to touch on that too, because the process of it, the process of everything that you do, and no matter what career field you're in, if you don't love the process, which I can tell you absolutely 100% do, if you don't love the process, you're not going to be successful.
You got to love and hate it at the same time.
Right.
I'll go home tonight.
But you still do it.
I'm 4 days away from my next big trial. and I will be home tonight complaining to Nicole, like, what am I doing? I'm going to lose this and that.
Right.
And she says, you do this every single time.
Yeah.
This is the process. Sometimes I have to be reminded that's the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like,
I think we all need that reminder.
The process starts 4:45 in the morning, 100 push-ups immediately. And then a 5-mile run typically, or I go to Planet Fitness with all the retirees early in the morning. I love that. And I don't break that routine, even in trial. I go there.
Good for you.
Oh, I love that, because no matter what's going on, I still get to go there in the morning or get that run in. Those things never change, because routine is so important. Routine is one way to manage this stress. Mm-hmm. But I never stop doing that. And it's all part of the process,
Yeah, it's important, man. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, a lot of people, I think, just get caught up in everything else, the noise of whatever. And people don't, they take a lot of that stuff for granted, Yeah,
you can't. I mean, today was a day off at the gym, right? I got up, I wasn't going, right? I could just tell I was just not in a great mood. I'm like, you know what? I just got to get my sneakers and go. And I did. And it kind of just got it out of me.
Yeah.
And I think the people I met with first thing this morning were probably grateful for that. I was in a much better mood.
Yeah, that's good. Well, man, this has been incredible. I've been really looking forward to this for some time now, and I'm glad we got to sit down and talk about this. I'm excited to listen to your show, watch your show. By the way, so everybody, if you're listening to the show, if you've enjoyed this conversation that Jarrett and I have had, on the show today, please give this guy a like and a subscribe, a comment, all of it. It all helps the algorithm, people. So, but if you ask one more time, well, where do I find it? Then you're just not the right.
That's it.
Right?
This is not the show for you.
Not the show for you. Yeah. But no, it's cool, man. This area needs this. I think it's awesome what you're doing. Obviously, you're going to get much more attention than just outside this area, of course. But
we hope so. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, you will. Oh, you will. I'm manifesting it for you right now. But again, like I love to see somebody else that's getting into doing something similar to what I'm doing. Obviously, different category. But man, it's exciting. I'm excited for you. Like, I keep saying it, because I'm just pumped about it.
No,
for you.
but and believe me, Bill, I've enjoyed watching you grow this show to the point where you're in your own. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
I know it's not an easy journey, and despite those people that don't know how to find us, it's a crowded pool.
Yeah,
and you're doing great. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. So like I said, we'll have you back on again in the near future. But in the meantime, again, think about it. Send some characters my way, and I look forward to the next conversation.
You got it. Thanks, Bill.
All right, man. Jarrett Ferentino on the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door Studio. Thanks for joining me. If you want to see more On the Stacks content, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/onthestackspodcast, or search the hashtag On the Stacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.